Welcome back to the deep dive. I've got a stack of sources here, a BBC News piece, a really detailed timeline, character lists, and we're diving into, well, a truly enigmatic story today.
We really are.
We're unpacking the complex life and, ultimately, the death of Kim Jong-nam. He was the eldest son of the late Kim Jong-il, elder half-brother of Kim Jong-un, a figure who, lived this life both inside and outside the very bizarre world of North Korea.
And met a violent, very public end.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a story just steeped in secrecy, privilege, exile, and a lot of international intrigue. So our mission today is really to sift through these sources, pull out the most important nuggets, key insights,
Right.
and try to figure out what Kim Jong-nam's journey and his really shocking demise can tell us about the dynamics at the very top of the North Korean regime and its shadowy connections. What do these sources really reveal?
Okay, let's get into it, starting right at the beginning.
And what a beginning it was. I mean, born into this world of intense secrecy, Kim Jong-nam, born May 10th, 1971 in Pyongyang. But his very existence, it was kept quiet. Initially, even from his own grandfather, Kim Il-sung.
Yeah, and the reason for that secrecy is, well, it's pretty fascinating according to these sources. His mother, Song Hye-rim, she was a famous film actress.
Right.
But her relationship with Kim Jong-il wasn't exactly politically convenient, let's say. She was older than him, and importantly, still married with a child when their romance began.
Which, by conservative North Korean standards, was seen as sordid. That's the word used. If word got out publicly, it could have really jeopardized Kim Jong-il's path to succeeding his own father.
Especially with rivalries already existing, like with his stepmother.
Exactly. So because of all this, he was basically hidden away, sealed behind palace gates, as the sources put it. He grew up in this large residence in Pyongyang, living mainly with his maternal grandmother and his aunt, Song Hye-rim.
And his mother.
She was often ill, apparently receiving treatment elsewhere, often abroad.
It's striking, though, because despite this isolation, the sources say Kim Jong-il seems to have genuinely doted on him. Co-sleeping, eating together, calling him when he was busy.
Yeah, and there was other family support too. His aunt, Kim Kyung-hoo, that's Kim Jong-il's sister, was reportedly always supportive. She even tried to formally adopt him at one point.
That's interesting, because you hear these rumors that he never even met his grandfather, Kim Il-sung. But these sources actually say, no, that's not true. He did eventually meet him.
Right, apparently thanks to his aunt and her husband, Jang Song-taek. And Kim Il-sung is even said to have favored Jong-nam among his grandchildren.
So a really strange mix of secrecy and, well, maybe some level of privilege or favor within the family, at least initially.
Yeah, a very peculiar start. But that life of secret isolation, it contrasts so sharply with what came next. Basically a decade spent outside North Korea. From 1979 to 1989, he was on what the sources are calling a 10-year odyssey.
A real global education. He spent time in Moscow, went to an international school in Bern, Switzerland, and later attended the University of Geneva. Plus, he also lived in Beijing from 1995 onwards. So, quite the world traveler.
Absolutely. And this exposure, it clearly shaped him. He became fluent in French and English, could speak some Russian, even Cantonese, and he developed this interest in computers while he was at the University of Geneva.
It sounds like seeing the outside world really opened his eyes. The sources say this exposure, combined with the contrast to the isolation back home, it led him to question North Korea's political and economic system.
Yeah, that seed of doubt was definitely planted early on. Yet despite that, he did get involved in the, quote, family business.
Right, he didn't just stay outside.
No. By age 17, that's 1988, he was already appointed chairman of the computer committee, head of IT policy. He even established the Korea Computer Center.
Wow, at 17.
Yeah. And he rose through the ranks, became a general in the Korean People's Army in 1995, and reportedly even headed the secret police in 1996.
So he wasn't just an exile figure from the start. He was actually in the system, deep inside it for a time. The sources link him to internal security, foreign exchange operations.
And even auditing state factories during the Arduous March in the 1990s.
The Arduous March, that was the devastating famine period.
Exactly. And being involved in those audits, seeing the harsh realities firsthand, the sources say he witnessed public executions of factory managers accused of stealing from the state.
Oh, wow.
And this experience was reportedly deeply disillusioning for him, about the country, about the system.
You can absolutely see how that would change your perspective. And then from the early 2000s, his role seems to shift more towards managing some of the Kim family's huge wealth. We're talking potentially billions of dollars.
Right. And this involved navigating illicit business operations, finding ways to, keep this money, both legitimate and illicit, out of the spotlight, avoiding scrutiny.
Which meant a lot of travel, right? A lot of
Yeah.
time spent in casinos across Asia.
Yeah, this is where that image of the jet-set lifestyle, the party boy reputation, really solidified. There are these reports, maybe exaggerated, maybe not, of him spending huge sums, like $100,000 a night, at the Pyongyang Koryo Hotel back in the 90s.
And he was reportedly linked to Room 39 of the Workers' Party.
That's the organization understood to manage the leadership's secret funds, yes. So he seemed quite connected to the financial machinery, even as he was growing, perhaps more disillusioned with the political side.
Okay, so while Kim Jong-nam is spending more time overseas, developing these doubts, managing funds, things are changing back in Pyongyang regarding who might eventually take over from Kim Jong-il.
Exactly. Kim Jong-il started a relationship with Ko Young-hui, a dancer, back in the late 1970s. This was after Jong-nam had already gone abroad.
And Ko Young-hui, she was different, wasn't she? The sources seem to highlight her as being more politically ambitious than maybe Kim Jong-il's other partners.
Very much so. She actively got involved in palace politics, befriended aides, and was reportedly working quite hard to position her children, Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-il, for the succession.
Okay, so this dynamic is pretty crucial for understanding what happens later. Because then we have the famous Tokyo airport incident in May 2001.
Yes, Fat Bear.
Right, where Jong-nam was caught trying to enter Japan on a forged Dominican Republic passport under the alias Pang Zhong, which means Fat Bear. He was with his family.
He got deported to Beijing, and this incident is often painted as the moment he fell out of favor for succession. The big mistake.
But here's where these sources offer a really key insight, particularly the BBC one. It suggests this is likely a misconception.
How so?
Well, according to this source, he was never actually a viable candidate in the first place.
Ah, okay, so the incident wasn't the cause of him being sidelined.
Exactly. He was apparently never really on that track. But the incident was useful. It was used internally, supposedly by Ko Young-hui, to push her own son's claims forward.
I see. So that's how this narrative of an exaggerated rivalry between Jong-un and Jong-nam might have started, or at least got fueled in the media.
Seems plausible, based on this account. So after that incident, and especially after his father Kim Jong-il died in 2011, Kim Jong-nam spent most of his time outside North Korea, basically living in exile, mainly in Macau and Beijing.
And publicly, he was pretty consistent about the whole succession thing. He repeatedly said he wasn't interested in it, not interested in politics. In 2007, he reportedly said he wouldn't take the job even if someone offered it to him.
He seemed resigned to Kim Jong-un taking over.
Pretty much. In 2009, he said he believed the reports about Jong-un being the successor were probably true. And in 2010, he apparently said that while he personally opposed the whole third-generation hereditary succession idea, he'd follow his father's decision. He kept saying, no interest, but I'll support Jong-un if needed.
But despite saying he wasn't interested in politics, the sources suggest he did voice criticisms of the regime, right?
Oh, definitely. There are reports from 2010 claiming he believed the sinking of that South Korean warship, the ROKS Cheonan, was orchestrated by Kim Jong-un, and that he actually protested about it to his father.
That's bold.
Yeah. He even reportedly suggested the collapse of North Korea was possible to an acquaintance around the same time. And then, of course, there was that 2012 book he did with the Japanese journalist Yoji Gomi.
Right, the interviews and emails.
Where his criticisms of the hereditary succession were very, very explicit, put right out there.
So this raises questions. His true political feelings, maybe, and also, crucially, his connections outside North Korea. The sources link him closely to Chinese elites, the princelings. He reportedly met Jiang Zemin's son, lived potentially under Chinese protection.
And this is where the story gets even more layered with intrigue. The Wall Street Journal reported back in 2019 that he was apparently in contact not just with Chinese intelligence,
But who else?
but also South Korean and Japanese intelligence officials.
Okay, now that's a whole different level of connection. An international web.
Exactly. And financially, things also seem to have gotten tougher for him after his father died. The money he reportedly used to get from his uncle and aunt Jang Song-thaek and Kim Kyung-hui.
Jang, who's later executed.
Right. That funding apparently stopped after Jang's execution in December 2013. There were even reports back in 2012 that he was struggling financially, getting kicked out of a Macau hotel because he couldn't pay the bill.
Quite a fall, if true, from managing billions to getting kicked out of hotels. Which brings us, inevitably, to the event that ended his life so abruptly and so publicly, his assassination.
February 13th, 2017, Kuala Lumpur International Airport in Malaysia. A very public space. He was at a check-in machine, traveling under that alias Kim Chol on a North Korean passport.
And the attack itself was just audacious. According to the accounts from the women later arrested, one woman basically covered his face with a cloth or handkerchief.
While the other sprayed something on him, he fell ill almost immediately. It was incredibly fast, and he died on the way to the hospital.
The news spread like wildfire. Malaysia confirmed the death the next day. South Korean media immediately screamed, "Assassination!"
And Reuters confirmed his identity pretty quickly using fingerprint matching, comparing it with data South Korea had.
Malaysian police moved fast too. They arrested 2 women, 1 Vietnamese, 1 Indonesian, and then reports emerged about 4 North Korean men who apparently fled Malaysia right after the attack.
And then came the bombshell finding from the autopsy announced February 24th, VX nerve agent.
VX,
Yep.
One of the deadliest chemical weapons out there, used in an international airport.
Just unbelievable. The response from North Korea, meanwhile, was, well, defiant is putting it mildly. Their state media initially just referred to the death of a citizen of our republic.
Not even naming him initially.
Not initially by name, no. Later they identified him as Kim Chol and claimed he died from shock. Not poisoning, just shock.
And they completely dismissed the assassination idea.
Completely. Called it a plot by the South Korean president at the time, Park Geun-hye. They demanded diplomatic immunity for the body, slammed Malaysia for doing an autopsy at all.
And then they blamed the U.S. and South Korea.
Yeah, later they called the whole assassination theory an anti-republic plot by the U.S. and South Korean authorities. They absolutely denied any involvement.
This obviously caused a huge diplomatic row with Malaysia.
Oh, massive. Malaysia recalled its ambassador from Pyongyang. They scrapped visa-free travel for North Koreans. They declared the North Korean ambassador persona non grata, basically kicked him out.
They even stopped imports from North Korea, planned to close their embassy there. Things got really tense.
They did. Eventually, though, things calmed down a bit. A joint statement was agreed upon. The body was handed over to North Korea. Travel bans were lifted. 9 Malaysians who had basically been held hostage in North Korea were allowed to return home.
And what happened to the 2 women who carried out the attack?
They were charged with murder. Their defense throughout was that they were tricked. They claimed they thought they were participating in a prank for some kind of TV show set up by North Korean agents.
Did that defense hold up?
Well, eventually, the murder charge against the Indonesian woman was withdrawn and she was released. For the Vietnamese woman, the charge was reduced to causing injury with a dangerous weapon. She was sentenced, served some time, and was released in May 2019.
So neither served long sentences for murder, despite the outcome.
Correct. And the whole incident had wider ripple effects, too. The U.S. redesignated North Korea as a state sponsor of terrorism, specifically citing the assassination.
And they concluded North Korea ordered it.
Yes, the U.S. government formally concluded North Korea ordered the killing using VX gas, and they announced more sanctions. And there was even an interesting little footnote, a report that North Korea later informally apologized to Vietnam, presumably over the involvement of their citizen.
Okay, so we've laid out the life, the exile, the death, the aftermath. But the massive question hanging over all of this is, why? Why kill Kim Jong-nam? The sources offer this really tangled web of possible motives, theories.
It's incredibly complex. The most widely reported theory, especially pushed by South Korean intelligence, is straightforward. Kim Jong-un ordered it. They framed it as a plan that had been in the works for years, stemming from Jong-un's paranoid personality.
Okay, the sibling rivalry angle.
Yeah.
But then there's the idea of his relationship with some older North Korean elites. Some apparently saw him as a kind of grandson figure because of his connection to Kim Il-sung.
Right, and while he didn't really have a power base inside North Korea, the sources say he was largely clueless about how to actually seize control nodes. Having someone like him, even on the outside, could theoretically have been useful for anyone mounting an internal challenge.
But his main potential backers, his aunt and uncle,
they were out of the picture after Jang Song-taek's execution, so that potential avenue was closed.
which makes you wonder again, if he wasn't a credible internal threat, why take such a huge public risk assassinating him? As you said, it feeds rumors of instability, which doesn't necessarily help Kim Jong-un.
Exactly. But then again, there are those reports suggesting earlier assassination attempts allegedly ordered by Jong-un going back as far as 2010, another in 2016. So maybe the perceived threat or the paranoia was real enough for them.
But then you have to layer on top of all that these reports about his international intelligence contacts. We mentioned the Wall Street Journal saying he was a CIA informant.
And also in contact with Chinese intelligence.
And other sources, like Asahi Shimbun and NNN, backing up the idea of meetings with U.S. intelligence officials. Reportedly twice a year, often in Malaysia, he supposedly even met an American just 4 days before he died, with talk of money changing hands.
And that detail from Asahi Shimbun about him possibly meeting a U.S. casino insider who might have been a secret Trump envoy, I mean, it sounds like something out of a spy novel.
It really does. And the sources also mention reported contact with South Korean and Japanese intelligence, too. When you see intelligence connections reported across so many different countries, China, U.S., South Korea, Japan.
It forces you to ask, right? Was he just living in exile, maybe enjoying the high life when he could, or was he actually a player, even a pawn, in a much larger game of international espionage?
And some theories directly connect these alleged contacts to his death. Yahoo! Japan suggested maybe U.S. government funding to him was the trigger. Wei J. Infinity and Sankei Shimbun floated the idea he might have been involved somehow in plans for a North Korean exiled government being cooked up by defectors.
And then there's that really dramatic theory reported by NHK, though China denied it, about the former Chinese security chief Zhu Yongkang.
What was that again?
The report claimed Zhu tipped off Kim Jong-un that Jang Song-taek, Jong-nam's uncle, was planning to support Jong-nam to eventually replace Jong-un. This alleged tip-off supposedly led directly to Jang's execution and maybe sealed Jong-nam's fate, too.
Wow. So that links his death directly to an internal power struggle, but one potentially triggered or influenced by an external player.
Exactly. It's clear from the sources there isn't one single, simple, universally accepted answer for why he was killed. But the sheer volume of these reported intelligence connections across so many powerful nations adds this incredible layer of complexity. It suggests his life was maybe far more entangled in the world of spies and secrets than his public party boy image ever let on.
Amidst all this chaos and danger, obviously a major concern became the safety of his son, Kim Han-sol. He'd been relatively visible, enrolled in international schools, even had a Facebook account at one point.
Yeah, and reports say he was taken under the protection of this group called Hye-rim Civil Defense after his father's assassination.
And that group publicly thanked the U.S., China, the Netherlands, and, interestingly, anonymous governments for helping ensure his safety.
Which, again, just reinforces this idea that multiple international players were aware of and maybe involved in the situation surrounding Jong-nam's family.
It's also interesting, as the BBC source points out, that Kim Jong-nam himself apparently didn't do much to correct the spin and distortions about him in the South Korean press over the years.
Yeah, the suggestion is he might have been following his father's advice, basically, that outsiders should see the North Korean leadership as being wrapped in a fog. Keep them guessing.
Maintain the mystique, perhaps. And ultimately, back when the assassination first happened, the main call was just for Malaysian authorities to be allowed to conduct a proper investigation, acknowledging right from the start that there were going to be conflicting accounts.
Which certainly turned out to be true.
So we've traced this really extraordinary and ultimately tragic journey of Kim Jong-nam. Born into extreme secrecy, gained this unique global perspective, became disillusioned with the system he was born into.
Lived a life of luxury, then exile, apparent financial struggles, all ending in this incredibly violent public assassination with a weapon of mass destruction in an airport.
And we've seen how his death isn't just some straightforward story of family rivalry. It's surrounded by this incredibly complex web of conflicting reports. Yes, internal North Korean power struggles are likely a factor, maybe the main one.
But you also have this startling array of reported connections to international intelligence agencies, the US, China, South Korea, Japan. It adds so many more dimensions.
So considering all these layers, the family dynamics, the internal politics, the financial dealings, and especially these multiple reported intelligence contacts across different nations, what does Kim Jong-nam's story ultimately reveal to you about that intricate, dangerous intersection of family, power, and international espionage that seems to exist just beneath the surface of the North Korean regime? What really stands out to you from this deep dive?